Women's Basketball Podcast. Mia O'Brien, Mitch Northam wishing you a happy 2025 and a happy 2025 on the hardwood. We've missed you guys over the last 2 weeks of what I like to call limbo between the Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's, Kwanzaa. I don't think I missed any of the holidays, Mitch. The holiday season that saw plenty of basketball, plenty of off days as well. And so what today's episode is going to be is us kind of catching you up on everything you missed and what's to come as we flip the calendar to January. First things first, though, Mitch, I know you were all over the world during the limbo 2-week period of the holidays. How was your Christmas break?
It's a holly jolly holiday with lots of travel, lots of miles logged. Charlotte, and then the illustrious places of Salisbury, Kent Island, and Fredericksburg, Maryland, which I'm sure all of our listeners are familiar with. Very entertaining places on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And then I went to Charleston to decompress and hang out with my wife, and that was great. And now I'm home, which is also great. I get to hang out with my cat. I get to podcast with you. Everything's good. And went to a women's basketball game yesterday, which was also good. I got to see.
Something tells me we're going to talk about that game in particular.
Yeah, so for sure. We will definitely be talking about that game. And how was your holiday?
It was good. I also got to hang out with my cat, so that's a win. We were in Las Vegas. The last time we spoke to you here on the Women's Basketball Podcast, we did the Trading Places and Spaces episode because Mitch had a wonderful interview for you guys. I was in Las Vegas for covering the Jaguars Raiders, but also for my radio program, Helmets and Heels. We were live at Circa Casino and Resort. And so we're finally back after a 2+ week hiatus, and we're excited to get you caught up to speed on everything we missed. But yes, I came back from Vegas, and I haven't left my house and haven't left the Jacksonville area since, which is a little out of the norm for me. But my cousins came down for New Year's, and it was a holly jolly time. As much as I love St. Augustine, Florida, don't go during the holidays, especially on a Saturday, because the sea of humanity, in the words of Michael Scott, we need a new plague. No, we don't. We already have one of those in the 21st century. We don't need another. As we take a look at today's slate, Mitch, we will get to her of the week. We'll get to Chef's Table. We promise we will get to all that. But the way we're going to start today is Mitch and I are going to give our 3 games that we had our eye on over this 2-week stretch. I'll get us kicked off, Mitch, with the game from Thursday night. The first ever SEC game for Texas and Oklahoma. Still feels weird to say. Final score, Longhorns 80, Sooners 73. Again, this game took place on January 2nd. For me, from a viewing experience, I'm curious to get your thoughts. This felt like the definition of please just let them play and let the game actually develop a flow. At one point in time, I decided I was just going to go to bed because I'm like, this review, it's taking way too long. And by the time I had brushed my teeth, gotten into my PJs, gotten into bed, I asked my boyfriend, hey, so did they finish the game? And he goes, no, they're still doing the review. And it was just so frustrating for a game that had so many stars and obviously 2 teams that are in the AP top 25. It was the Taylor Jones game for the Longhorns. Certainly Rory Harmon obviously was a factor in this one. But for me, I just came away from it and I said, this says to me that when Madison Booker has 4 fouls versus when Reagan Beers of Oklahoma has 4 fouls, the Longhorns, quite frankly, have more pieces that can step up in her absence when you have to force yourself into hockey shift rotations just to try to fill your front court because your de facto leader is saddled on the bench.
Yeah. I just looked it up. There were 54 fouls in that game, which is
at one point, Mitch, there were 54 fouls to 44 field goals.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, just ridiculous and absurd. But yeah, it was a great game. I love, that despite the Big 12, fracturing, that these 2 teams came over to the SEC together. So we get to have the Red River rivalry still in women's college basketball. My big takeaway from Texas's, that game and their last couple games, really their win over Arkansas as well, are that, there's a lot of really good players on this Texas team. We talk a lot about Taylor Jones and Rory Harmon and Madison Booker. But the freshmen, they have really good freshmen. Justice Carlson is playing really well. Justice Carlton, excuse me. And Jordan Lee, both of them coming off the bench and just giving the Longhorns an extra boost. this was a team last year that, went deep in the NCAA tournament and kind of had some depth issues along the way, injuries and everything else. They're pretty healthy so far, and they have kind of these extra pieces coming off the bench. I think Texas is going to be probably in the top 10 through the end of the regular season. They got a really tough matchup coming up that we'll talk about later. This Texas team, I think, is right up there, with anybody. And Oklahoma, with Reagan Beers, they have a high ceiling as well. We'll see kind of what they can do in SEC play the rest of the way.
Unfortunately, it will be the only Red River rivalry on the hardwood on the women's basketball side of the season, which is, again, unfortunate because these are two teams that are going to be hanging around the AP top 25 all season long. Speaking of teams that will be hanging around the AP top 25 all season long, I had this down as one of my games that I loved from the last 2 weeks. Mitch, you were on site, boots on the ground, and so therefore take it away with our second game.
Yeah, so Notre Dame 76, North Carolina 66. This was a ranked on ranked matchup. There were nearly 5,000 people in Carmichael Arena for it, which is a really good number for Carmichael considering that students weren't back on campus yet. I mean, to me, the building looked pretty full, not quite a sellout, but still a great atmosphere for this type of game. There are times at women's college basketball games where I'm not sitting super close to the floor. And so one of the ways I sort of get around that is I have a camera and I like to take pictures. So during a quarter or two, I'll go down to the floor and I'll take some photos, and it kind of helps me like recognize how incredible some of these athletes are and just kind of get a different perspective about how hard someone's battling under the basket or how fast someone's moving. Man, this game, like, there were times where Hannah Hidalgo, I've just never seen a player move that fast in terms of like jumping a passing lane before. I mean, she's like a defensive back out there. Like, she's like Ed Reed, just jumping in front of careless ball handlers and picking a pass off and just sprinting the other way and laying it up. To see her up close and in person, like if anybody listening has the chance to do it, go see Notre Dame in person this year. They're absolutely box office. And they're finally starting to get healthy. Maddie Westball came back into the picture in this game. So she's going to get more work into the flow of this game as well. Notre Dame was just awesome from 3-point range against North Carolina. I think North Carolina is still a really good team. But when Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles are playing like that, Notre Dame is a great team and a team capable of winning a national championship. Olivia Miles was the one who stood out the most to me. I mean, there were multiple times where I like audibly gasped and probably said a 4-letter word because of something Olivia Miles did, whether it was swishing a 3-pointer with Lexi Donarski's hand in her face or, just pulling off like an Iverson move on somebody. Her handle and her confidence and her shot is just at an all-time level. I actually asked her after the game because she's shooting just a ridiculous amount percentage-wise from 3-point range this season, far better than her marks before she got hurt. She made a career-high 5 3-pointers against North Carolina. So I was like, what's up with this? Like, did you really work on this, like, while you were injured and rehabbing and stuff? And she's basically said that, during her rehab, she got to see the game from a different view and got the chance to kind of let some little things go. And it really increased her confidence and gave her kind of a short-term memory. So she's letting it fly. And it's really fun to watch. Her and Hidalgo, I know there were some doubts before the season started about can they play together? Those are pushed aside now. We know the answer to that. They're the best duo in women's college basketball, full stop. And I think they're going to go pretty far this year. What did you see from that game in Notre Dame?
I'm so glad you ended on that note, Mitch. Isn't it so validating as one of these talking heads, one of these podcasters and journalists, to be clear, we are both journalists. It is so fulfilling. And perhaps it's because I've heard for the better part of the last 4 or 5 months how I told you that this would be a great Jaguars team, Jacksonville Jaguar fans. And then obviously they went 4-13. And so we told you that there was a chance this would be the best backcourt in the country, that this could be something special between Olivia Miles and Hannah Hidalgo. And man almighty, it's just so fulfilling. But
it very much is.
the free flow and the chemistry for two players who have never played together, that needs to be noted. Outside of a couple of practices, once Olivia Miles was able to return to the floor last year, they have never played a game together until this year. And the fact that it looks like they've been playing together for 3-4 years is just beautiful. Those splits you brought up, they brought it up in the broadcast. Olivia Miles, her freshman season, shot 10% from 3-point range. 27% her sophomore year, 22.8% in 2022-2023. Obviously, she did not play last year. She is shooting 47.8% from beyond the arc. That is just an incredible number. She doubles up from the last time she played a full season, or at least close to a full season. And you couple that with another stat they featured on the broadcast that is a little concerning for Notre Dame long term. To your point, getting Maddie back, certainly being able to go more than 6 or 7 in deep in their rotation, I think is going to be huge. But Hannah Hidalgo has accounted for almost 50% of Notre Dame's scoring this year. And Olivia Miles has accounted for 58% of their assists. I mean, you can look at that one of two ways. You can look at it and say, is this sustainable? Or you can look at this and say, we have never seen anything like this. To future WNBA top 5 draft picks who are becoming one of the greatest shows we've seen on the hardwood in some time.
Yeah, I think the guard depth is concerning, just because I do think that, I really hope this doesn't happen. But if anything should happen to Hannah Hidalgo or Olivia Miles injury-wise, I think this falls apart. I think they very quickly go from being a national championship contender to, like a Sweet 16 team. It's going to be very hard. But when those two are playing together and going full like that, I said to multiple people yesterday, I was like, I don't know what you're supposed to do as an opposing team when those two players are playing that well together. I mean, there were multiple times where like Olivia would come down and, boom, boom, do one of the Iverson moves and draw in another defender. And it's like, okay, well, if you don't help and double Olivia, she's going to get to the basket. But if you leave Hannah Hidalgo wide open in the corner, obviously she's going to drain the three. Yep. If you leave Sonia Citron wide open in the corner, she's going to drain a three. If you leave Maddie Westbeld or Kate Koval or Leah Tu King open in the paint, they're getting an easy layup. So there's just all these weapons around her. I also looked it up yesterday. It was the first time since Olivia got hurt, so this would have been February 2023, that Miles, Sonia Citron, and Maddie Westbeld all played in the same game with each other. Just like an example of how hard Notre Dame's been hit by injuries over the years. The other thing I wanted to mention, Neil Ivey talked about this in her post-game press conference. Yesterday was like kind of an emotional game for them. And I didn't realize this because I don't follow the NBA super closely as I used to. But, Neil Ivey's son, Jaden, had a season-ending injury last week. And she was like really feeling it, like got emotional in the press conference talking about how this team really like picked her up in kind of a hard spot. So I thought that was a really cool story and a special moment. But yeah, man, Notre Dame is legit. I think they're going to win the ACC as long as they stay healthy. They look like a machine. I mean, we've already seen them, beat UConn and USC. It's going to be fun to watch the rest of the way.
And Niele Ivey had one of the most elite fits that I've seen of the 2024-2025 season. I actually was going to Google, how Google now with your iPhone, you can hold it up and then you take a picture and then it can press it and it search
Where
it.
is this
I honestly wanted it.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't try it. I didn't know if my TV would let me do that, but I loved her dress and I want one. So Niele Ivey, if you're listening to this podcast, please either leave a comment or DM me. I need to know where you got that dress.
Easily the best dressed coach in the ACC.
Yeah. Let's keep it moving. We will have another segment regarding courtside fits. I think you all know where we're going with that one, but we continue our whip around of the games you missed over the holiday break. In the words of, I forget who sings the song, but you're going to know. Not sorry, Miss Jackson. Ooh,
Outcast, of course.
Yes, Maryland is for real. As first predicted on this podcast, Mitch, the Terps are one of 5 undefeated teams remaining in the country. Those 5 teams, by the way, we also predicted a couple of them. Georgia Tech, 15-0, official Georgia Tech Stand podcast, never forget. LSU is 17-0, Ohio State 14-0, UCLA, the number 1 team in the country, 15-0, and Brenda and her Maryland Terrapins. Brenda Fries, the longtime head coach in College Park, 14-0, despite bringing in how many transfers this offseason, Mitch? 10?
I think 10 is the number.
Yeah. 10, obviously Cheyenne Sellers returns, which is a huge factor, but yes, 10 transfers into College Park, and they have not missed a beat. 2 big wins for the Terps over the break. Maryland 72, Michigan State 66. That game was 2 Sundays ago on December 29th. I was actually watching this game while covering a Jaguars game from the booth. I had it pulled up on a separate tab. This was the definition of it ain't pretty, but it's gritty. Michigan State was down 17 in the second quarter, rallied to tie things up. It was back and forth from there. The Terps turned the ball over 25 times, still found a way to win. It's the definition of gritty, not pretty. And in the final, like 5-6 minutes, this turned into a little bit of a free throw shooting contest, but Maryland is able to grind one out in College Park. And then on Lisa Bluter Day, her alumni day, I guess is what they called it at Carver Hawkeye Arena yesterday, they go into Iowa. And quite frankly, Mitch, this final score of Maryland 74, Iowa 66, it doesn't tell the full story because in the first half, this was as one-sided an affair as I think Iowa has played in certainly the last 4 years since Caitlin Clark's arrival, but I would even go even further back past the Kathleen Doyle Big Ten Player of the Year campaign, before Megan Gustafson's rise to National Player of the Year. There were fans tweeting at Jeff Linder, the longtime beat writer for Iowa, saying that Jan Jensen needs to be reevaluated. This is the worst. If not for Lucy Olson's 9 points to end the first half, Iowa would have been down 30 and they would have scored 18 points in the first half. So yeah, this was ugly. However, they flipped the script and they limited the Terrapins to just 27 points in the second half. And so I think it's going to be fascinating to see the fallout for both teams and what people remember this game by. Yes, Maryland made 12 threes. There were some absurd circus shots that left you wondering, like, I thought you were supposed to get a friendly bounce if you're Iowa because you're the home team. They did not. Maryland got all the bounces, all the friendly rolls. And at the end of the day, they're 15-0. And this is a place that I don't think a lot of people thought that Brenda Friese's Brenda Fries, say that 5 times fast. Brenda Friese's squad thought they would be in.
Brenda Fries, cooler than a polar bear's toenail.
There it is. The pride of Cedar Rapids, by the way. We always love when she gets to go home to her home state of Iowa.
Yeah, the Iowa game in particular, I think that game said more to me about Maryland than it did Iowa. I think Iowa's going to be fine. The people who say Jan Jensen needs to be reevaluated, I think those people should be reevaluated. I felt so bad for
Jeff. Like, I was like, I'm trying to deal with the Jaguars and everything here on the football side. And I happened to be I had the game on and then I scrolled through Twitter and I'm like, why are they going after Jeff? Like,
what's happening? Yeah.
Come on now.
But yeah, Iowa's going to be fine. I think Maryland is the team that is exceeding expectations. And I know that you and I, talk super highly of them in the preseason, just because we believe in Brenda and we know that Brenda's going to figure it out. But yeah, I mean, the thing with this team is they're just so deep and they have so many people who can fill it up. On one night, against Iowa, it was Kayleen Smeichel, who comes in, 26 points, 5 rebounds. You get the typical really good Cheyenne Sellers game. She's the consistent bus driver for them. Bree McDaniel has played well lately. And in that Michigan State game, you get, Sailor Parfenbarger stepping up, and some other players as well. They're super deep across the board. Maryland has some tough games coming up too that we'll talk about, but yeah, the Terps are 15-0. And yeah, I think this is a team that they can go far, not because they have star power like Notre Dame, but because they just have an abundance of talent. They're just so deep across the board. Brenda kind of built this team. I don't know if she intended to do this, but they're sort of built like South Carolina this year in that there's not really a star per se. Cheyenne Sellers is your leader, but there's nobody on this team that we're going to talk about as they're a lock to be a first team All-American. But across the board, they're super deep. They can play with anybody. They can throw a lot of different looks at you. They do a lot of things really well. And depth is an important thing when you get into March.
One more game for us to take a look back at before we look ahead to this week's slate. It's another Big Ten game, which, brief side tangent, Mitch, it has been painful. And of course, we both are voters on the men's side for the AP Top 25. to see and watch the commercials and the games that are advertised as Big Ten rivalry showdowns. And it's Illinois at Oregon. It's Maryland and insert name here, Indiana, UCLA last night, and certainly on the women's side as well, which brings me to USC Rutgers, Jersey Mike's Arena, a classic Big Ten showdown in Piscataway, New Jersey on a Sunday evening. What is going on? I just,
wait, first, is it really called Jersey Mike's Arena?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it used to be called the RAC, the Rutgers Athletic Center, but it has since become called the Jersey. It's one of the few name changes for an arena that I'm actually very much in support of, because it just flows off the tongue, right?
Yeah.
I forget what Providence is now known as, but it used to be the Dunkin' Donuts Center, so they called it the Dunkin' Donuts Center or the Dunk, and I forget what their name is now, but I think it's another food, and it's just not Jersey Mike's Arena. Cool with it. Please don't change it now that we've said it on a podcast.
Yeah, no, I think we should nickname it the Hoagie,
the Hoagie.
Going to the Hoagie to watch some.
All right. Well, here's the thing, Mitch. We thought we'd be talking a lot more Rutgers basketball. Obviously, not comparatively to some other Big Ten programs that I think we're going to be talking a lot more about over the next 3 months. But we thought they'd be competitive. They had a couple names that we've mentioned on this podcast before. And now one of those names is seemingly being suspended, coach's decision. So before the game even tipped off on Sunday night, there was drama to be had in Piscataway.
Yeah, so real quick on the game, which is not really important. USC beat the brakes off of Rutgers, 92-42. Juju Watkins did her thing, 23 points, 14 rebounds. Yeah, that's cool. That's
water's
whatever.
Wet, all that good stuff.
More importantly, I think we have on our hands the successor to the Angel Reese story a year ago, the messiest story in women's college basketball so far this year. I'm just going to take our listeners through the play-by-play.
I can't wait. I mean, look, we're here for the content. We're here for the bits. So keep it moving.
So Kaiomi McMiller is a really good player, one of the best freshmen in the country. She went viral earlier this season for pulling off some Iverson, God Shamgod, crossover move. She has a sick handle. She was ranked as the 27th best recruit in her class by ESPN. She's from the DMV area, Silver Springs, Maryland. Shout out there. Before she had ever committed to Rutgers, she signed an NIL deal with the Jordan brand. So she's a big deal. Lots of talent, had offers from Texas, Florida State, Tennessee, Ohio State, NC State, Louisville, Baylor. She was sitting behind the LSU bench when they won the national title in 2023. So Kaiomi McMiller, great player, lots of talent. On Sunday morning, several hours before this game against USC, she shares this message on her Instagram page, which is very cryptic. To my fans, I would like to apologize. I will not be playing in today's game versus USC, which is number 4 in the country. This decision was made by my head coach. Thank you for your continued support. 2 things.
You forgot the most important part. How did she sign that message?
What
was the name?
God bless all of you, Kaiomi, the product McMiller. The product.
We live in an NIL age. We needed to make sure we got the product in there.
Yes. The product. So, one, it seemed obvious to everyone right away that McMiller was suspended. That's what it seemed like to me, and not injured for this game. 2, it was very weird that this information was being shared in this way. All signs point to, based on what has been reported by now and what I've heard, is that she got into a bit of a locker room scuffle or altercation with a teammate and was suspended for this game. But then things continued to get weird. You had a former Rutgers player, April Sykes, essentially subtweeting her with things like, quote, "Doesn't matter how much money is involved now, no one is bigger than the game," and, quote, "Don't let these new generation of kids fool y'all on what Rutgers basketball really represents." And then on Monday morning, NewJersey.com has a story where they interviewed a man by the name of Leonard Ellerby, who is apparently a part of McMiller's executive team. Mia, do you have an executive team?
But I do not, Mitch, but that's because I'm not the product.
That's true. You're not the product
brand. And if you are the product, you probably need an executive team.
So he's apparently the former CEO of this company who promoted a lot of Floyd Mayweather fights. I imagine he's heavily involved in her NIL stuff and maybe represents her sort of as an agent of some sort. Anyways, he tells NewJersey.com, quote, quote, I don't want to speak in terms of long term, but you don't treat people like this. You don't handle a situation like this. He's talking about the Rutgers coaching staff, essentially. And then he says, who knows what her future looks like right now? Then, also on Monday, Kyle McMiller goes back to her Instagram page and shares and then deletes a bunch of posts on her Instagram story that is a collection of other people saying things like, you should transfer. It wasn't the same without you. This is laughable. How do you not play her? Y'all got cooked, and on and on and on and on. And then just before we hopped on this podcast, I saw that Kylie McMiller's dad is now talking. And he told On3 that her goal is to be at Rutgers and not ever transfer. My bold prediction is that the marriage between Rutgers and Kylie McMiller is not going to last past this season. And we'll see what happens after that. But for now, I think that we have on our hands the messiest story in women's college basketball.
Has On3 or any of the recruiting sites logged a crystal ball prediction as to where she could be headed? Because I do love your super sleuth chronological timeline that she was behind the bench at that 2023 national title game. We know somebody who has no issue, A, bringing in some chaos, and B, heading into the transfer portal and getting a sought-out star, i.e. Anissa Morrow, or once upon a time, even Angel Reese. And I am, of course, talking about Kim Mulkey and LSU.
You know who likes mess? Kim Mulkey.
She also likes some messy outfits, which we're going to get to in last call. Don't worry, folks. You have to stay till the end because producer Dimitri is going to somehow superimpose the video, if only in our social shorts, because you have to see what Kim Mulkey had on. But we're going to get to that in a second. Point being, yes, I couldn't agree more. I think Keomi McMiller is gone. She will not be at Rutgers. It's disappointing for me as a New Jersey native who part of how I first got into basketball was C. Vivian Stringer in the 2006 national runner-up team. This is not what that proud program once was, as we have seen from the likes of, I don't know, the New England Patriots and several other dynasties and programs that had the same coach for 20 plus years. You don't want to be the guy after the guy or the guy after the gal. And this is just very unfortunate for the state of Rutgers, especially when you consider on the men's side of things, they have two of the most heralded freshmen. They are playing. There's, I don't think any sort of off the court controversy regarding Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper. But for the state of Rutgers basketball, I need some resolution on this. And I also want Rutgers basketball to be good again because it deserves to be.
Yeah, I really hope that they actually figure it out and maybe Kyle McMiller is long-term there and stays at Rutgers for 3 or 4 years and, kind of brings that program back to the top. But I don't know. I don't know if you can come back from this. This is pretty messy. This is pretty ugly. I don't know. My prediction is that she ends up in the portal and maybe ends up at LSU or elsewhere in the next cycle.
Maybe Maryland. I mean, Brenda wasn't able to keep her in the DMV, but maybe there's a reason for that. So
could be.
Yeah, could be. That concludes our recap of the last 2 limbo weeks of women's college basketball on the hardwood. Let's now get to our her of the week. This week, Mitch, look, this is someone who I think we could have given it to the last few weeks, but in light of one storyline we haven't addressed yet on today's program, which of course is Paige Becker's injury that she suffered against Villanova on Sunday. This week's her of the week has to go to freshman sensation Sarah Strong, someone, of course, who I know you are very familiar with from all you did in North Carolina at UNC last year, as well as her being a North Carolina native. Sarah Strong has scored in double figures every single game she has played at the collegiate level. Again, she is a freshman. She has 620-plus point scoring outputs this season. We're talking, I'm not going to invoke you-know-who. I'm not going to invoke the great one over my left shoulder. However, these are Caitlin Clark levels that we are seeing from Sarah Strong. And if Paige Becker's, even if it's only an AZ FUD injury, as Gino Auriemma said in the postgame yesterday, the actual quote, so with AZ, the reference to AZ was with regards to Paige Beckers getting rolled up on, and he described Paige's injury, despite the fact that she had a towel over her head and looked like she was crying. He said it's like AZ Fudd's injury, which she only missed 3-4 games, and so that's his expectation right now for Paige Beckers, that it's not as bad as many people believed it would be. But if Paige can't go for any long-term amount of time, that's going to open up the door for Sarah Strong to become even more of a household name. And I thought this was pretty high praise from Gino when he said, I would like to think that if anything great is going to happen to this team, it's going to be because Sarah is at the forefront of it, not Paige.
Yeah.
Their true freshman, the number one recruit in the country, Sarah Strong, are her of the week.
Yeah, I wrote about this at For the Win, USA Today's For the Win, last week, I think. And then a couple of days before that, I was actually on the Locked On UConn podcast, kind of talking about this after they had lost to USC. And I think that UConn is still a contender for the national title this year, but it's strictly because they have Paige Beckers and Sarah Strong. Like, I mean, really two of the best players in the country. Like, I think Sarah is already, I think she's the clear front runner for National Freshman of the Year and could easily play her way onto like one of like a second or third team All-American spot. But there are problems for UConn though. I mean, they're atrocious at defending the three and they're really not good at rebounding. And those are two things that you got to be better at if you want to make a deep run into March, especially if you go up against Notre Dame again, because they're really good at both of those things. But Sarah Strong, legit box office. She's going to be, I think, the nucleus, for UConn going forward. She's going to be someone that Gino builds around. We'll see if they get it together, this year to really make a run in what we presume to be Paige Beckers' final season. I think at this point, with AZ Fudd, it's like, it's a luxury if you can get her for 20 minutes a game in March. If you can, great. She's one of the best shooters in all of college basketball. And I would love to see her play more minutes and more games. But it's a health thing. So, in the meantime, enjoy Sarah Strong. She's about to tear up the Big East because I don't think there's any big in the Big East that can guard Sarah Strong. So I think we're going to continue to see her put up big numbers.
And it's good for UConn because if Paige Beckers does bid adieu to Stores and heads off to the WNBA, as so many anticipate, they'll simply just reload with a new face of the program who is already in-house. Let's take a look at what's to come this week in women's college basketball with our chef's table. Mitch has got an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert for your viewing pleasure this weekend. Mitch, what are we watching for?
Yeah, I mean, these are three big ones. They could really all three be entrees here, but we'll go through them. So Wednesday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern on FS1, a classic Big Ten matchup between between the USC Trojans and the Maryland Terrapins. So Juju Watkins and Kiki Iriafen and that group, they get to go to College Park to face
on a Wednesday, but I thought they were student athletes. Oh, I guess winter break's still going on.
Yeah. Homework on the plane, charter flights and all that. We get to see Juju Watkins, go up against Maryland in College Park. I hope, I know it's winter break. I know it's a weeknight. I hope that Maryland fans really pack the game in for this one. I hope the Xfinity Center, is it called that still? The Xfinity Center?
I think it is. I'm pretty sure it is.
It used to be called Comcast, but I think it's the Xfinity Center.
I think it's Xfinity now because I know Xfinity bought Comcast. So yes, let's go with yes.
We could start a podcast about just stadium names at some point.
True. Yes.
I think this is a must watch. This is going to be really good. The USC could be the team to hand Maryland their first loss, or it could be further validation of what Brenda Freese has cooking there this year if they can pull off what would be technically an upset win over USC. Despite Maryland being the home team, USC is ranked 4 spots ahead of them. Our entree.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, how would you evaluate USC? Since we talked about their game with UConn. They finally win the big one, in my estimation, which was crazy, as we alluded to on the last podcast, because every sports book in Vegas, I know because I was there, only had that game available of any women's basketball game. And across the board, whether it was Caesars, BetMGM, Circa, they all had the Huskies 5.5-point favorites. And obviously it was a hard fought game. And UConn came back after kind of sleepwalking through the first quarter. And USC makes a huge statement. But I know our knock on this podcast for the Trojans early on, Mitch, was that if Juju Watkins is held at bay, who becomes the bus driver? How would you evaluate that matchup? Certainly, we know Juju is the star, and she's going to be the number one item on the scouting report each week. But going against the Maryland Terrapins team that we noted earlier in the show, anybody could be the bus driver on any given night.
Yeah, I think early on in the season they weren't. I think I might have even said this on the podcast. They just weren't getting what they needed from the supporting pieces around Juju. They weren't getting what they needed from Kiki Iriathan or Rhea Marshall or Talia von Oelhoffen. I think beginning with that UConn game, they are starting to get that. I think this is a team that's starting to play more like a cohesive unit. Kiki Iriathan had 18 points and 9 rebounds in their win over Michigan. Rhea Marshall has played really well lately. So I think as long as that continues, like you let Juju continue to do Juju things and be the bus driver and be the star. But like when your number is called upon, you kind of got to step up the other pieces on USC's team. As long as they can do that, I think USC is going to be fine. I do wonder, like, in this game against Maryland, like, I just want to see, like, what Brenda Freeze kind of has cooked up, in terms of, like, a defensive scheme to contain or slow Juju down some. Because, yeah, if you can do that, we haven't really seen a team, like, I guess, effectively, like, neutralize Juju Watkins so far. But if you can do that and basically make the other players beat you, I do kind of wonder, like, what the outcome is there. When they lost to Notre Dame, it was basically just Notre Dame just outran and outshot and outscored them, just put them on a track meet, and Notre Dame won. So I wonder this is going to be a much watch, I think, just to see kind of what Maryland has cooked up for them.
And it's only the appetizer. Our entree this week is a good old-fashioned blue blood rivalry in the triangle. Mitch, walk us through Duke, North Carolina.
Yeah, so I'll be at this game. This is Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern on ACC Network. Number 14 Blue Devils at the number 19 Tar Heels in Carmichael Arena. North Carolina, coming off that loss to Notre Dame. But, I mean, I look at that box score and I look at how North Carolina played against Notre Dame, and, like, they didn't really play bad per se. They just let Notre Dame make a bunch of threes. I mean, Notre Dame shot a ridiculous percent from three-point land. And again, I just don't know what you do as an opposing team when you go up against Olivia Miles and Hannah Hidalgo, operating at high speeds. So I think this is going to be a game where North Carolina tries to kind of get back on the right track. But Duke, playing really well. They've won a couple in a row now after dropping that game against USF that we talked to Sammy Puisis about on our last episode, which was awesome. This is going to be a great clash, great rivalry game. Both of these teams, I think, jockeying for position to try and get a top 16 seed in the NCAA tournament, both still on the hunt, trying to, unseat Georgia Tech and Notre Dame as, the top of the ACC this year. And we are going to get 2 of these games this year. We're going to get 2 Duke, North Carolina games. We won't get UNC, NC State twice because of how the schedule model changed. But in the ACC, everybody has one protected rival that they'll play twice. And for the Blue Devils and the Tar Heels, that is each other on Tobacco Road.
Do they both have trips out to visit those new ACC member institutions? Will they be having an old-fashioned Atlantic Coast Conference game against Stanford or Cal? Do you know?
I think that Stanford and Cal both come to Duke this year,
Okay.
but I think North Carolina has to go there. I think that's what's happening this year. I'm pretty sure I'm right about that.
None of it makes sense.
As I pull up North Carolina's schedule real quick. Yeah, UNC actually has a 3-game road swing at the end of January. They go at Cal, at Stanford, at Clemson, and then home for Virginia Tech the day before Valentine's Day.
I just want to know if Bill Belichick's going to be in attendance. That's my biggest question right now. Not that you want to hear that name. I know for those of you in the Triangle, our OGs, probably a little sick of that name, or at least Mitch's from some of his assignments. But hey, listen, that would be good pub, good PR, and good for the brand.
I haven't seen Bill Belichick at a women's basketball game yet, but I did see Courtney Banghart at his press conference. So maybe he will repay the favor. Maybe against Duke. Maybe he's waiting, for the big game. He did tell us that Billy's first words were "beat Duke." Do I believe him necessarily? But that's what he says. That's his story. It's a good story. Whatever.
We're talking about the product. We're talking about the brand, and that would certainly be good for the Chapel Hill, Chapel Bill brand. No question about it.
Old Chapel Bill.
A little Tobacco Road rivalry. All right, Mitch, what's this week's dessert?
The dessert this week is Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. This game gets the mothership treatment. Number 5, Texas at number 2, South Carolina. This is Vic Schaefer and Dawn Staley mixing it up again. They had a lot of battles when Vic was at Mississippi State, and Dawn won a lot of those battles. And this is going to be a really good game. Just tune in. This is a heavyweight SEC fight.
Now, when we look at this game, the instant reaction is to think Madison Booker, Taylor Jones, size in the front court for Texas, certainly Rory Harmon, yes, but also going up against the South Carolina team that, not to jump too far ahead in this week's rundown, but will they have Ashlyn Watkins? Will that front court that we have been pretty critical of on this podcast at different junctures of the season so far, will it be tested against a bigger Longhorns team?
Yeah. Ashlyn Watkins' status is still unclear. And yeah, that'll be something big to look at. I think going into Sunday, especially if we're not quite at the making money with Mitch segment, but if you're thinking about gambling on this game, I would tune into. And one interesting thing about the SEC this year is, like football, women's basketball has availability reports. So all the teams in the SEC are putting out, who's questionable, who's not available before games, which, if you're betting on women's college basketball, is something that you will want to pay attention to. So, yeah, I would definitely monitor and check in what Ashlyn Watkins' status is ahead of that game because, yeah, like you mentioned, Texas does have a pretty big front court. And as we talked about before, South Carolina, they don't have that dominant center this year. So, what happens if you don't have Watkins and you have to contend with the likes of Taylor Jones and Madison Booker?
It was a pretty impressive, as I didn't realize my my audio was up there. Hopefully it didn't come through. It was a pretty impressive day for Chloe Kitts, though, in a victory for South Carolina over Mississippi State, Vic Schaefer's old stomping grounds. 17 points, 10 boards for the sophomore out of Florida. And so there is some front court depth emerging for Dawn Staley. But yes, certainly Ashlyn Watkins' status will be a storyline to watch. Additionally, the tweet that they sent out, Mitch, with regards to Watkins, all they tweeted out 3:06 p.m. Sunday. We know she's cheering from the locker room, but we won't see Ashlyn back on the court today. I can safely say that's the first time I've ever seen that type of tweet from a basketball, football, any collegiate or professional operation.
Yeah, I hadn't seen this until now. And yeah, I have to agree with you. I can't say that I've seen a team frame a, hey, this player is not playing again today like this. So, yeah,
we know
sure.
She's cheering, though, from the locker room, so she's not
sure. South Carolina social media team, if that's how you want to frame this, that's fine.
Salute.
I think a simple Ashlyn Watkins is out for the rest of the game would have sufficed, but, sure.
I appreciate the illustration. We can truly visualize it. Speaking of visualizing, I'm seeing lots of money in the future of our listeners, Mitch, because not only did you go 3-0 last week, you've gone 9-6 so far this season, and I know you've got 3 winners for us here today.
Yeah, after I think 2 weeks in a row of 1 and 2, we went a solid 3-0 last week. So that was very good. So shout out to Maryland, North Carolina, and USC, who we all talked about and who all covered in the games that I picked for them. So this week, Thursday, this is another really good matchup if you get the SEC Network Plus. This is 6:30 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. LSU at Tennessee. Tennessee, the line I'm seeing right now is favored by 1.5. I like Tennessee to win that game and to cover, by 1.5 points. They're coming off, their first loss of the season, losing to Oklahoma. I think that Kim Caldwell is going to have them whipped into shape and really, geared up for this game against LSU. And also, LSU ain't played nobody.
We respect the undefeated record, Kim.
Yes,
but what's their best victory right now?
probably against NC State, which is a somebody, but they haven't played enough somebodies, I guess is my point.
Yeah, I mean, there are 2 SEC games to open conference play. Arkansas, Auburn, not exactly top of the table.
Nope.
Seton Hall, no. Stanford, UW. I mean, maybe I don't know, Troy and Tulane turning a corner. Do we know? I'm sorry, Troy and Tulane. We love you. It's very hard when we go back to that list of the 5 remaining undefeated teams in women's college basketball. When you look at the gauntlet that Georgia Tech has, against all odds, been able to triumph through, and they are now 15-0. Maryland at 14-0. We documented 2 pretty tough Big Ten opponents, and they won in 2 very different fashions. That showcases there's a lot of ways to skin a cat in College Park. Ohio State is 14-0, UCLA 15-0. Obviously, they've been able to go on the road and also pick up some wins. It hasn't just been in the friendly confines of Pauley Pavilion, which, let's be real, have they really left the Bayou down there in LSU? I'm not sure. I like the play, Mitch. I do like the play. Have we followed? Speaking of bits we have on this program, do we know Kim Caldwell? When is she due? Do we know Baby Watch? Is it on this week? Because we've been talking about the baby bump. I'm just saying, maybe she pops the kid out in the next few days and then returns to the side. I shouldn't have to return to the sidelines. That's a lot to ask for Kim. But the team gets a lift. They get a bump because their head coach gives birth. What are we looking at?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure when exactly her due date is, but yeah, so we're still on baby watch. We will watch that closely and figure out when Kim Caldwell is due to give birth. But yeah, as far as it goes right now, I guess we can expect her on the sidelines against LSU, and probably not wearing an outfit as loud as Kim Mulkey will wear. But I think Kim Caldwell will be there on Thursday. And yeah, back to your point about the undefeated teams, I think out of all those undefeated teams, I think LSU has been tested the least. And when I look at Tennessee's schedule, they've beaten Florida State and Iowa and Richmond, and they have some really solid wins that I think they've been challenged in. And so I just believe in Tennessee to get it done at home, especially after a loss, just kind of bouncing back and rallying against this LSU team.
You also believe in the Mountaineers. West Virginia, a 2.5-point favorite at OK State. Walk us through Saturday's Big 12 matchup out in Stillwater.
Yeah, I just think West Virginia is a good team this year. I really like JJ Quinterly. She's the bus driver for them, playing really well. Oklahoma State, I just haven't been super impressed by. I know they have the same record as West Virginia. They're both 12-2, but I look at Oklahoma State's wins and it's okay, you beat Iowa State, that's solid. You beat the brakes off of Baylor, that's cool. But you also lost to Richmond, and you also just lost to Kansas. And West Virginia, I think, just has the better resume this year, and I think has the better team. They went into the NCAA tournament last year and really gave Iowa a good fight, that Caitlin Clark Iowa team in Carver Hawkeye Arena. And most of those players are back on this team this year. West Virginia's 2 losses are by 5 points apiece to Texas and Colorado. Meanwhile, they've, notched some good wins along the way as well. So yeah, I like West Virginia to go on the road and beat the Cowgirls.
Yeah, Mark Kellogg is kind of picked up the baton in a good way where the
Mhm.
Huggy Bear left off in terms of identity, in terms of toughness out there in West Virginia. Obviously, I'm referring to Bob Huggins, the longtime men's basketball coach for the Mountaineers, who is no longer with the program. But I do think Kellogg has that same sense of, hey, we will be physical. We can win a rock fight. We can win a fist fight. That was certainly on display when they went to Carver Hawkeye Arena for the round of 32 last year. And I think it'll be on display throughout Big 12 play as well. Let's wrap up in the ACC. We threw a little shade earlier, question mark, at the Wolfpack. Don't worry, Wolfpack. Mitch loves you. He's picking you this week.
Yeah, the line I'm seeing right now for Sunday's game, this is 3 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. So this is following the Texas-South Carolina matchup. So, just keep it locked in on ESPN on Sunday. NC State at Stanford. I'm seeing Stanford favored by 3.5. I would pick the Wolfpack to cover. If you get a good odds on Wolfpack money line, I would take that. I just think that Stanford is just down bad right now. They don't really look super competitive in the ACC right now, frankly. They've lost 5 of their last 6 games. Their only win in that span is against UTSA by 5 points. They got whooped by Cal, 20 points. They lost LSU in overtime. They lost to Ohio State by 25 points. They lost to SMU, who I expected to be potentially the worst team in the SEC and the ACC this year. Excuse me. What conference is SMU in again?
I don't know. At this point, I don't know. They
And
could
then
be in the Mountain West at this point. It wouldn't surprise me.
and then they lost in overtime to Clemson. And I was high on Clemson coming in this season as just them being better than they were last year in year one under Sean Poppy. But for them to beat Stanford, I mean, that's a huge win for his program and building that forward. So I guess I'm just saying I don't believe in Stanford right now, and I think NC State has figured out sort of how to do more with less, like how to sort of play around their problem, that we've talked about a lot, where they don't have a big. They don't really have strong post play. They don't really have strong rebounding up front. They figured out a way, though, to just kind of, win games and play around that. NC State has won now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games in a row. Their most recent win, 39 points over Boston College. So, yeah, I like NC State to go out there and Isaiah James and Sanaya Rivers to do their thing and beat the Cardinal pretty convincingly.
So to recap, Mitch is picking 2 favorites in this week's Making Money with Mitch. He has Tennessee -1.5 on Thursday. He has West Virginia -2.5 on the road at OK State Saturday, and 1 underdog this week. The Wolfpack, 3.5-point dogs at Stanford at 3 p.m. Eastern on Sunday. It's our last call for this week's episode, Mitch. What did we miss? Let's begin with Paige Becker's, the injury that we alluded to earlier. I did want to give you guys the full quote from Gino Auriemma. Like when it's with AZ, like when it was with AZ, it's not the worst that we can imagine. So that's great news considering how awkward it was. We obviously will keep you guys posted here on this podcast and beyond with regards to Paige Becker's injury, which obviously not only would affect UConn's chances, but could affect the entire college basketball landscape, both the men's and the women's side, because she obviously is one of the biggest brands right now going. One honorary her of the week. How about Vanderbilt's Michaela Blake? She had 36 points in her SEC debut against Georgia. I know Georgia's not a whole heck of a lot to cry home about in women's basketball, but still 36 points. The freshman in her SEC debut, 5 assists, 0 turnovers, a single game freshman record.
Yeah, Vanderbilt's got it, humming. And that freshman Michaela Blake certainly a big part of that. I think they're going to be a team like to watch in the SEC this year. They might sneak into the tournament as like an 8 or a 9 seed. But yeah, Vanderbilt, good team, really going this year. The one thing I wanted to mention real quick, just sort of as it relates to Paige Beckers and UConn, we talked a little bit about on our Trading Places sort of disjointed episode, the USC UConn game. Fox put out the numbers, the viewership for that game. It drew 2.23 million, which makes it the second most ever watched women's basketball game on Fox, and the most watched women's college basketball game on any network this season. I believe that game got an NFL lead in. So it's just like, I just wanted to note that because I think it's interesting how Fox is using the women's college basketball package that they have. You know, we saw them give Iowa and Caitlin Clark a ton of attention and spotlight and really good windows last year, and deservedly so. And then this year, the way they just experimented with this game, you know, you have this big time matchup, UConn USC. You give them an NFL runway, and it went head to head. I think with a college football playoff game, I think it went head to head with Ohio State, Tennessee. So to draw that number, going head to head with college football, pretty good. Turns out, if you put women's college basketball on a channel that is easily accessible in a window where a lot of people can watch, they will. Look at that. Interesting.
Who would have thunk? Well, especially because for no one is happier except for, you know, us on this program, because we don't like conference realignment for our own nostalgic sake. But the Big Ten goes from having Caitlin Clark, the biggest draw in the sport, to now having Juju Watkins, who outside of Paige Beckers is the next biggest draw in the sport because of the Big Ten's media rights deal. Oh, and by the way, for this game, and because Fox also has the rights to the Big East, you could bring those two brands together of Juju versus Paige. It was a brilliant move by them, and it was so exciting to see. When I was in MGM, or I was in the MGM casino during that game, I was eating dinner, and you saw it right next to that college football playoff game. It was on every other TV, which is so exciting for the sport that we both love. Back to some great performances from the last 2 weeks. Tania Latson, a single game FSU record, 40-point performance. She's absolutely ridiculous. She's the reason Florida State's contending in the ACC. They're probably not going to win it for all the reasons we outlined, with Notre Dame just operating at all cylinders, Duke and North Carolina living up to expectations for the most part. But a shout out to the Tally Town, FSU, Tania Latson. Before we get to the last call item, the news item that I know you have all been waiting for on this program. Mitch, did you see what Kim Mulkey, A, was wearing on Sunday, and B, that they had a Kim Mulkey look-alike day and a half-court Kim Mulkey look-alike contest at halftime of this game against Auburn? Please pray for our country.
I was going to call Tania Latson a walking bucket, but I think it's more appropriate to call Kim Mulkey that.
Well said.
Based on what she was wearing.
Yes.
I think that's appropriate. I don't know if that outfit has a name. I don't know if the designer has a name. I think that we can just refer to that as the walking bucket outfit, because that's what it looked like. So
I don't know if I can keep going. Like, we may have to end the podcast right there. That was the ultimate mic drop. We did want to shout out, actually, I lied. There is one point we do have to hit that really will bring home this wonderful recap of the last 2 weeks that we've missed you all on the Women's Basketball Podcast. And as we get ready for 2025, I received one text from Mitchell Northam during both of our holiday travels. And it was the Brian Windhorse meme with regards to Asia Wilson mysteriously appearing in Coral Gables at the UNC Miami game during the holiday break. Why would she have been in the Miami area, Mitch? Like, she's
very
not
strange.
Unrivaled, right?
No, and I don't think she's from Miami, and doesn't have any
ACC. Like, why would she have been like hanging out in Miami?
Doesn't have any real connection to the Hurricanes program or North Carolina. But she was there. She was in Miami.
And decided to go to a women's basketball game, which we support.
Which is awesome.
In favor of this. And look, Jazz Roberts, shout out to my big dog. Like, I mean, obviously I've documents on this podcast, been covering Jazz since she was a sophomore in high school. I'm excited that Asia Wilson was there for her, for Lexi Donarski, for so many of those players on both sides. But yeah, no, Mitch and I were just, musing over,
interesting.
Just amused by, that's nice of Asia.
Yeah. All jokes aside, it was super cool to see her. Yeah. Surprise the North Carolina players after the big win there in Miami, and storm into the locker room and take photos. She was taking photos with everybody. I follow a couple of the team managers at UNC on Instagram, and they were taking pictures with her. So Asia being very gracious with her time, and seems to be living her best life in Miami. So good for her.
just a great place to hang out in the off season. Vegas is great and all, but and South Carolina's,
Is
our
there
home.
another basketball team in Miami?
Yeah, I think so. I think they
Mm,
play in that National Basketball Association.
interesting.
I think they're called the Heat,
Mhm.
if memory serves me correct. Yeah. Shout out to Asia. Shout out to you guys for listening into this week's The Women's Basketball Podcast. Mitch, I know you're headed to that Tobacco Road rivalry on Thursday. What other games and what other assignments do you have on the docket this week?
Just that one. Heading to Duke, North Carolina, which should be a lot of fun. And then we'll get back into the swing of things the week after. I'm heading to Pitt at Duke Men tomorrow night, Tuesday night. Listeners of this podcast, this will already be out after that game happens. Stanford is coming here. They're going to play at Duke. I'm going to go to that
An
game.
old-fashioned ACC rivalry.
An old-fashioned ACC rivalry. Yeah, that's. Oh, and our friends at USF, they're going to play at ECU later this month. So
Ooh.
I think I'm going to drive out to Greenville and see Sammy Puisis and friends in person.
I love that. Well, speaking of our friends of the program, I did get a scheduling change on my end. I will be on the sidelines Thursday when Florida Gulf Coast comes up here to Jacksonville to play the North Florida Ospreys. So excited to see that new iteration with a new head coach, even though it's the same identity. Very excited to see what is going down with the Eagles here in 2025. I also will have sideline duty for UNF against Stetson on Saturday. And so we are in the thick of it, folks. Conference play is in full swing, and we have you covered here on the Women's Basketball Podcast each and every week. He's Mitch. I'm Mia saying we will catch you guys next week.
Deuces.